I want to switch gears a little bit and ask our discussant to come up here, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Camille Crittenden, if you could please join the stage. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause, please, to Camille.
Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Before I introduce Camille, I want to address another white elephant in the room. And some of you have already noted this to me. Camille is very welcome here because she brings a very high-profile, certain type of background with her that brings civil society into this conversation. The notions of ethics and responsibility and multi-stakeholder dialogues, right? And she's also a woman, and I want to address very quickly and openly to you that we have tried very hard to get more women onto the stage, and that when I made comments earlier about how diverse this group is, then yes, it's diverse between California and the existing innovators ecosystem in California and Germany. But of course, we all know, especially the Americans amongst us, that this group here in this room is by far not diverse enough. We need more minorities here. We need people of all shades and colors and walks of life in this room, because what AI does is it redesigns the social contract and how society works. So everybody needs to have a say, right? And we're falling short on some of those fronts, but I want you to know that we've taken that on, and we know that, and we've done the best we could. And next year maybe you'll see even more diversity in the room. So for now, I'm very, very grateful to you, Camille. Camille, you are the executive director of Citrus, which stands for, at UC Berkeley, which is the other school up north. It's the, thank you, there's at least one other guy from Berkeley.
Another fan.
In an ocean of red and white. Camille is the executive director of Citrus, which stands for the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society. Very long.
You passed the quiz.
I passed the quiz, very good. Okay. Established a number of years ago as a private-public cooperation between the UC system and corporates in order to produce societally responsible solutions in information technology for society. I guess technically it's Citrus and the Banatao Institute. You were also the executive director for human rights at Berkeley Law, and you've written extensively about social responsibility and technology, multi-stakeholder, women in technology, things of that nature. So thank you for enriching the conversation. Simple question, what charge would you level on the tech community? Like, what's the one thing we have to keep in mind to be responsible and ethical as AI leaders?
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to join the conversation. I really want to endorse a lot of what has already been discussed here, and particularly with John. I think you highlighted already one of my main recommendations, and that would be to create these multi-stakeholder communities to really bring a variety of voices to the table. I think convenings like this are very important, and congratulations to the organizers here for bringing such a wonderful group of people from 2 continents and from corporations, from academia, et cetera. So I think really having that variety of perspectives, not only on various demographic levels, age is another one that has come up with all these pleas for education. I think we need to think about that across the age spectrum as well, and to really keep people engaged and abreast of the ways that technology is being used and misused in some ways, so that they can be savvy consumers of technology.
Okay. Certainly, AI is not for young people, right? Some of my students say, yeah, the old people. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, 40 and up. And I'm like, thank you, you just failed your course. This is for everybody, right? And so how do we get concrete in involving everybody? Ethics too often becomes such a highfalutin, airy-fairy, waffly kind of thing. How do we make it more concrete?
Well, I think to point out those places where AI is already having an effect on how we live. If people don't really recognize that the things in their hands are full of all kinds of AI systems and algorithms. And, the way that you got to the conference here today is because AI told you which way to go, or the way that you know what to watch next on Netflix or on YouTube is because there's an algorithm behind it that's detecting, your preferences. And people perhaps don't recognize, I know everyone in this audience does, but generally, might not understand that as being artificial intelligence. And so I think perhaps bringing it down to those kind of concrete levels would help to make people more familiar and perhaps more comfortable understanding how AI is affecting the way that they live.
Yeah, so really get down to use cases and demonstrate the value and the pitfalls,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this Magna Carta idea. We also mentioned it in the book. And yet the companies that we talk to say, look, I got to get a little bit more specific. Like, I got to hear from a user, like, when you're using Waymo or when you're using Waze, which I couldn't live without, what are the things that you're concerned about? How does that impact the use case? And how do I change that and still provide value to you? Because we want that value. This is not about taking the digital platform economy down. This is about making it more equitable and fair and responsible, right?
And transparent.
And transparent.
Yeah.
That's big, right?
Yes.
Transparency. John, is that counter to sort of competitive advantage and wanting to make sure that not too much that you're doing is open and laid out there for other competitors to copy? Is that a contradiction?
So I'm a big believer that corporations serve stakeholders, not just shareholders. They serve their customers, they serve the community in which they live, they serve their employees as well. And if you take that perspective, then you want to think about what's the right thing to do in the long term, not what's the right thing to do in this quarter because it gives you a 1 or 2 quarter advantage. And I think if you think that way, you'll realize that the trust of your customers, the trust of the community are valuable things that you cannot afford to ignore. And that causes you to think differently.
Right. Would you say that we can leave those decisions, that governance, to corporations themselves? Do we need new institutions in society, right? So we've got a corporate leader who was an academic leader, who was a startup leader. We've got somebody who knows about civil society and human and civil rights. What's your opinion? Do the institutions that we have in society today, do they suffice?
So I think Camille made the key point here. Somehow you have to bring together the various constituencies to decide what the boundaries are, how do you do it, is there a regulatory framework, what is that regulatory framework? I think everybody in tech worries about legislation as the regulatory framework. Look at copyright law, which still looks like it was written more than 100 years ago and is now an impediment to various kinds of innovation. So we've got to think about how do we do that and create that regulatory framework. But you could imagine a combination of government regulation together with with interpretation by the companies that there was agreement on how to set standards that could actually work well in this case.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need both. I think we need guidelines that are established by this multi-stakeholder kind of coalition that's going to involve academia, that can also benefit from the huge range of data that the companies are producing from the communities that they serve. So there's a whole circle of people who need to be involved. I think we can look to acting organizations, as I think you've written about, for trying to verify the accuracy and effectiveness of various algorithms, something like an FDA or like a NIST or even like a LEED certification kind of thing, where you could have some sort of third party evaluate how well the algorithms are serving the parties they're intended to serve.
And what's the right forum to do this? I mean, is it, we have the Partnership on AI, which is trying to be international, sort of. It's trying to be multi-stakeholder, sort of. But really, at its heart, it's very corporate. We've got IEEE, the engineers. We've got lots of people around, on the science side. These are arguably all elites, right? Do we need somebody in the middle who is sort of an independent, unbiased arbiter? Who is that? Foundations? Is that, can that be the government?
Well, I think foundations is a good idea. The World Economic Forum is also working
Okay.
on projects around this. I think one section of the UN perhaps could get involved because it is going to be a global question. It's not just a US question.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. I want to open up now. We have more Slido questions here. Why don't you throw them up there so we take a few of those questions. Let's see whether that can work. There we are. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. The first one there, John, we don't want to dance around that, do we? Right? So, no, that would not work out well for us. What is the true long-term goal of Google aside from doing no evil?
To build technologies which improve people's lives.
Okay. What if, when you discover that in that intention, you actually are doing quite a bit of harm?
That's difficult. You're going to have to wrestle with that situation. And I think in some cases, look at what's happening at YouTube. It's very difficult to decide what videos to take down, what videos to put up, what videos are harmful leaving up, what videos need to be removed. But I think that's kind of I think we're just going to have to wrestle with it. I don't think there's an easy way out of it.
What would you, if John were to hire you as an advisor, what would you say to John? What should he try to do to avoid that?
Yes, I agree it's tough, and I would again try to bring together representatives from the company with civil society organizations, some of whom are being affected by the policies that...
You know, the New Zealand video, the shooting video, was one of the most incredible. It was taken down thousands of times. Every single time it was taken down, somebody reloaded it up onto YouTube. So something's broken, not just in technology, but in society.
So is that a case where AI could be helpful? Can AI detect
AI did take
that?
it down. It did,
More
but
quickly?
it takes it down quickly, but people are reloading it, right?
Yeah.
Thousands of videos a second are loaded up, so
Yeah.
it's a constant struggle.
It's a race, right? It's an arms race almost.
It is.
I'm going to reframe the next one here a little bit, right? This talks about information asymmetries. Google is very powerful. Google knows a lot about us, as does Amazon and Facebook and all these big platforms, including the Chinese. So you could argue there really is information asymmetry between me and Google about me or about my context, right? Is that fair? Is that a healthy development? And how could...
That's really for you to decide. If you think that information, you want to preserve you don't want your information used for anything, you just set it. Set it to destroy all your information pick a time, 30 days. Wipe out all my personal information every 30 days. Every search, every place I've been, everything else, wipe it out. And if that works for you, then you can live with that decision, right? If though, 31 days later, you want to go back to visit some place that you visited 31 days earlier, and it's no longer in maps or quick search, that's a trade-off.
And could I customize it so that I say, look, I want my GPS data you can have, but the other data I don't want you to have? Can I customize it to what I believe my personal privacy preferences are?
By application. I mean, the biggest problem with personal privacy is getting people to work through exactly what do they want to keep private and what do they don't want to keep private. How many people use a credit card? Everybody uses a credit card. Every single purchase, every single thing you purchase, not only what you purchased, but what you purchased with it is recorded and data mined. And we seem to accept this, and there are roughly as many credit card transactions per second as there are Google searches per second. So that's the scale of the issue we have to think about. We've got to think about, it's the stakeholder argument. We've got to think about what are the guardrails we want in our lives.
Can I go back to that as well about information asymmetry and just to put in a plug for open data projects? Because I think that those are very important, and that's another way that constituents can interact with the government, especially because they are often the ones that are putting out new data sets about social issues and social trends that I think we as engineers and computer scientists can take advantage of to visualize and feed information back to people who are voting or who are making other kinds of civic decisions.
Yep.
I need to ask you a closing question because we have to go into lunch. Everybody's stomach is growling. We would love to hear from you. I'm going to seed a question we're going to come back around tomorrow. and that's the China question. Should we, as a transatlantic partnership, engage with China, and if so, why and how?
I think we have to engage with China. I think you can't take the largest country in the world and at some point in the not too distant future, the largest GDP in the world economically, and ignore them. This was a much easier question to answer with the previous regime in China than it is with the current regime. We used to think that democracy would proceed all over the world and would get better and better, and I think we've learned democracy can actually be set back in the world. And how we deal with China, given what's happened, I think it's a much more difficult, but I think in the end you have to engage.
And you're obviously very active in China, collaborating even with the government. That must be a hot button issue for you internally every day.
Well, I don't think we collaborate very much these days.
Okay. So you've pretty much curbed it then and keep it under wraps, or keep it.
There are no Google employees left in China, for example.
Yeah, all done.
All out.
All out. That was a discrete ethical choice?
That was a discrete ethical choice.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right.
It was a discrete ethical. Ethical is putting a judgment on it. It was a discrete choice we made because we didn't think we could operate a search engine fairly in China, and we couldn't protect people's privacy.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Yes.
I would just add from the academic perspective that we are going to need to continue at least some level of engagement with China because in the US there's something like 1.1 million international students and about a third of them come from China. So we as a US university and not just UC, which hosts many of them, but across the country are going to need to engage with Chinese students, whether they come here to study and stay or whether they come here to study and go back to China. That will also be one piece of how we need to think about relationships with China.
Thank you for that. I bet all of you have opinions on it, and we're going to come back around to it tomorrow. So mull this over, think about whether you agree or disagree, shades of gray, and we will hopefully bring this to a little bit of a close tomorrow. Let's give a big round of applause to our panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.